Welcome back to the Schiller Hamilton Podcast. My name is Derek Harper, one of the attorneys here in the firm, with Charlie Corrigan, another one of the attorneys here in the firm. If you've followed our channel and listened to our podcasts, you know that we are a personal injury firm, which usually includes lots of different types of civil causes, which are better known in the legal profession as torts. But that's a word that most people maybe have never heard about. So we wanted to just kind of have a little discussion and chat about it. Chat about torts, go back to law school a little bit. You're a little fresher out of that than me. But, I think, just to kind of start off, I'll kind of define it. A tort is a civil action, for some sort of wrong that someone causes against someone's person, property, or dignity. Okay. That can be negligent or intentional.
Right.
So, we can kind of brush on negligence a little bit. In fact, if you just want to kind of talk about negligent acts a little bit, then we can kind of move on to intentional, which are some of the more interesting torts that people maybe not have heard about or know about.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, negligence is just, it's kind of intuitive what it means, just being reckless or, I guess unwise, to say it in a nice way. But basically, it's the elements are duty, breach, causation, and damages. Someone, just put it simply, someone did something dumb and it caused injury or some kind of harm. But that's just unintentional torts, generally speaking. And then intentional torts are assault, battery, false imprisonment, trespass to land, trespass to chattel. Pretty much for our purposes, the only most likely, it's going to be probably assault and battery that we would handle. False imprisonment, probably
pretty
less,
rare.
Less likely. But when it comes to intentional torts, at least what I've noticed is that usually there's kind of a combination of the two. So in the scenario where, let's just say a bar fight occurs where an employee or an agent, someone acting on an entity's behalf, like a bouncer or someone like that, does an intentional tort like assault and battery, or I guess in that false imprisonment, if they kind of, put them in the back, don't leave, you're going to stay here overnight or whatever. So that would be an intentional tort by an individual. And if the entity was responsible for that vicariously, it would probably be through some form of negligence, like inadequate training, inadequate vetting, hiring someone with a record for violence or, someone improper vetting, lack of security, just something that basically with due diligence and like reasonable preparation and standard and expected running of a business, so to speak, just depending on what the business is, it should have been avoided.
Yeah. Like you said, they do kind of merge a little bit. But the intentionals are, I would imagine, in our practice, they're a lot more rare.
Oh, yeah.
We probably spent a lot of time talking about them in law school. But they are a little bit more rare. And, part of that is, like you said, there's elements to negligence, duty, breach, which like you were just talking about in that hypothetical, if a bar negligently hires somebody, then they had a duty to its customers to hire people who are qualified, and then they breach that duty. So, if they cause damage, then that's going to cause the negligence.
Right. A reasonable person would expect that when they go into a bar, a bouncer's not going to just beat them up unless it's really, really necessary or just not at all.
Yeah, I know.
So, yeah.
And, what's kind of weird I remember about from, law school and just in practice knowing this too is, there's a separation of assault and battery in tort law versus criminal. In criminal law, people always think assault and battery.
Yeah, this was
that's what the charge
from law school.
Yeah, the charge is assault and battery, but in tort law, assault is the apprehension of the contact. So like
imminent.
Yeah, if someone rears back and is going to hit you, threatening you, saying I'm going to hit you, and then they rear back until the moment that their fist hits your face. That's the assault.
Assault.
That apprehension of being touched in an inappropriate way, or harmful way is the assault. the problem with it in practice is there's really no damages, So, these things exist in law, but they may not be in practice used in lawsuits. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a rare. I mean, with an assault case without just standing alone, I mean, it would probably have to be a situation where there was severe emotional distress and some kind of impact. Mm-hmm. Maybe just emotional distress, but then you kind of do need some form of contact to really to make that. But
so you need the battery too.
Yeah,
and the battery is that harmful touching,
right?
Or unwanted touching. It doesn't have to necessarily hurt you, but it has to be unwanted and not what you want.
Right. And but going kind of the combination between the two. Another one that it's kind of tricky when it comes to intentional torts because as a general principle, it's going to be one individual doing something to another one, making that person feel like they can't leave in a confined space, false imprisonment, or assault and battery usually go together. So let's just say hitting someone just for simplicity purposes. But a tricky part about someone receiving compensation. Matter of public record at this point, but we've had a few cases where people have literally died from these kind of altercations at bar and restaurants. So the hard part about someone being made whole for potentially their life being ruined from an intentional tort is basically having a source to be compensated from. So real an example is if there's a high school kid who's just getting bullied, constantly and in an extreme manner, and then including being harmed physically, then it's it would have to be made whole. What are you going to do? Go after someone individually? Just some kid who's beating you up or hurting you? They're not going to be able to compensate you or be on the hook, even if they are legally the actual and financial practicality for a life lost if you end up, say, committing suicide or something along those lines. But so really you need to look at safeguards such as the school, such as the institutions and entities, organizations that are responsible for the care of, say, in this scenario, the student, where they dropped the ball as far as preventing bullying that they should have known about, that they did know about. So it gets really tricky with intentional torts to that's just the reality of the situation. Yeah. It's kind of a jaded way to but it's just true,
Coverage is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you just get in a street fight, then there's probably not going to be any coverage.
Right.
Most people are not walking around with, umbrella liability policies,
right,
personal acts. The other thing too is a lot of insurance companies may try to, or successfully, exclude intentional acts.
Right.
Yeah. That's why, like you said, a lot of times they are coupled with negligence as well. The traditional sense that you see a lot of times with, assault and battery, I think is exactly what you're talking about, coupled with some place, whether that be an act of an employee or something like that. And then sometimes also, there are some narrow exclusions where maybe you're at someone's house and another guest at that person's house, gets in a fight, shoots you, anything like that. It may be covered under homeowners insurance and things like that. But a lot of times you're right. Coverage is the issue. Damages and coverage are usually the biggest issues with these. Because even if you have, like, false imprisonment, for example, you may be false imprisoned by someone, and that may be even an employee of a store, for example. There's limited exclusions as to when a store employee can detain you for like shoplifting and things like that.
Suspected.
Yeah, there's some different, exclusions and stuff, but imagine if you just decided to lock me in a closet, then you falsely imprisoned me. You didn't have a legal basis for it. You didn't have the authority to do it. I have a claim against you, but what are my damages again? And you brought up emotional distress. Infliction of emotional stress is a tort.
Right.
There's negligent and intentional, but those have to require usually twofold kind of things that make them difficult too. Is one, they have to require some sort of action that's outrageous.
Like a very, shocking.
Yeah. Outrageous,
to the
and then
conscience.
Usually has to have that physical manifestation. I don't know if you remember that. Like
with negligent infliction. Yeah.
You have to be so distressed that it causes physical.
Right. The physical man. Okay.
Maybe that be that you are sent into such a depression that you get physically sick, or heaven forbid you try to harm yourself or have some mental break. Some manifestation other than you're just sad because someone did something to you.
Right.
So they do have some interesting kind of aspects.
Yeah.
But I think those are kind of the main ones against the person. That we've kind of branched on here. Is assault, battery, false imprisonment, infliction of emotional distress, or intentional infliction of emotional distress, IIED. Those are kind of all against the person.
Yeah.
Now, there are some torts that are against property, and they're even more rare.
Yeah.
But I'm not to get into it, but there's trespass to land, trespass
conversion.
Trespass to chattels, which is one of the best words probably from law school. Is what the heck is a chattel, which is personal property.
Right.
And then conversion again. So those are kind of more rare. But do you remember what those are?
Conversion is basically, I equate it somewhat to embezzlement, but basically it's where I'm a little hazy on it, but and correct me if I'm wrong here. Yeah. I'm going off.
We're just
going off the dome here, but I believe it's when essentially you take title to something or ownership of some tangible good or some form of property, and it's not like you steal it. You just basically have possession of it, and you either sell it. Basically, you isolate it as your own good when it's not yours. Right. Usually it involves some form of deceit or trickery.
Yeah, but if I remember correctly, it doesn't have to.
Yeah, not necessarily.
You can have like causes of action like breach of trust,
right?
Things like that, where I convince you to loan me your car.
Right, and then you sell it,
and I eventually sell it.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, that's a really good example, and those have damages and stuff. Problem is they're just kind of rare.
Yeah,
trespass to land. I don't think we'd ever really see. If someone walks across my yard, technically they've trespassed them across my land.
Right.
Not to get into all the defenses.
And with conversion, another thing is it gets really tricky. Definitely get an attorney if you're dealing with this, because a lot of times what happens is I've only had one conversion case, but there is, so someone gets an item, let's just say a car, used machinery, four-wheeler, whatever, and then they realize it's not good title. They were given this item and then they realize, I don't actually own this. This is not mine. This is, I can't sell it. It's not it's not registered properly with the DMV, etc. But so they could be several links down the line as far as, so it gets really tricky figuring out who initiated the conversion, who did the wrongful act, because Bob sells to Joe, with forged title, or just, hey, trust me, we're good to go. Here's and then good faith sells to Jane, who sells to you, and then you realize, and you say, Jane, what the heck? And Jane's like, what are you talking about? So it does get very hard, but it's very rare. It's probably not, I probably already went into it too much considering how rare it is.
It is the one that probably would come up more than anything. I think if I remember correctly, trespass to chattels is also temporary.
Yeah.
The conversion is really the big one, and they can couple like criminal theft. If you, again, thought that you could actually recover something from somebody, for damages and things like that, then you would maybe file civil action for conversion if someone stole from you.
And going back earlier, glad you mentioned that, because when it comes to intentional torts, usually, I mean, we're talking in the civil context here. Usually the legal remedy that people pursue is they press charges.
Yeah.
They want to see someone be held criminally liable for their actions rather than civilly liable.
Exactly.
But anyways, I mean, it's just an option. I mean, classic example is O.J. Simpson was sued civilly and there was a verdict and a judgment entered against him by the jury.
I was about to say about that, like the difference in the proof.
Yeah,
and he was found not guilty of beyond a reasonable doubt on the criminal charges, but it's preponderance of the evidence in civil. And another thing too is that suit would have stemmed from battery.
Right.
So that is a classic example. I'm glad you brought that up, of a civil charge of battery, or civil, action for battery.
Yeah, coupled with,
now, granted, it was a wrongful death action, but the tort that led to the death was battery.
Yeah.
Probably assault too. But, that's a really good example too, that they can accompany criminal charges. But I think, like what you were saying, in smaller things, theft, the inclusion of criminal restitution in a lot of these types of cases sometimes removes the need.
Exactly. Yeah.
If someone stole your four-wheeler, sold it, well, they may be ordered to pay restitution as part of the criminal charges.
Right. And the judge
that may get you close to being whole. And so, going off and hiring an attorney, probably having to pay out of pocket for an attorney for something like that to recover,
value. That fine, criminal fines get converted into civil judgments all the time. It's almost, that's the more common remedy. But anyways, I mean, it's still fun to talk about intentional torts.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to kind of talk about. It's just,
fun word,
these are
torts.
Some things, people don't even a lot of times know what tort means. They hear tort reform. They hear things like tortfeasor, like we may use the word tortfeasor.
Yeah.
And this is word I think I was remembering the other day. I want to say this word dates back hundreds of years. Tort.
Yeah.
And so, it's an old word that we don't really use in a normal day. You're not running around saying that, Charlie, you committed a tort against me. But
speak for yourself. Just kidding.
Well, we use it actually. You're right.
Yeah.
But normal people,
behavior's
normally the general populace is not running around using words like tort and tortfeasor. Right. But that's some of the joys of law school, of using some stuff.
Yeah.
Like that. But that's why we wanted to just chat about it. And then now, I will say the kind of the last category of torts, probably I would imagine, of intentional torts, is the most litigated in South Carolina. And that would be torts against your dignity. Okay. Now, that includes lots of different things like invasion of privacy, things like that. But the big one's defamation. Defamation.
And invasion of privacy now is, if you can figure out who wronged you in like the cyber hacking age.
Yeah. Or like, I know drones. I'm not looking at you, Trent. But I know when drones first came about, I think there were some lawsuits about invasion of privacy from that and everything, but I think that's why all the registration and FAA rules now, existed. Talking about the drone thing too, we just mentioned the fact that a lot of those regulations from the FAA probably came about from invasion of privacy and things like that. But I don't know if you remember too, a lot of times they would fall out of the sky. So just, we're sitting here, this is like a tort exam. We're sitting here thinking about this, but, if a drone flies over your house, videotapes, you through your window, that's an invasion of privacy possibly, depending on your state,
right?
And different things like that. But then if it falls on your house, and let's say it falls through the roof of your shed and onto your four-wheeler that has not been stolen yet, that's going to be trespass to land, trespass to chattels.
Again,
that's just an interesting thing that I just thought about. That's like a tort exam that we probably would have done in law school of those crazy things.
Just
find the tort.
Situation that would never in a billion years happen.
Yes. But it has 15 different torts in it.
Right.
But anyway, so I do think that invasion of privacy does exist, and but I think defamation. I know in my practice, I've had people talk to me about defamation probably more than
it's defamation, especially in the age of social media and people who are self-employed, a lot of entrepreneurs, it's, just depending on the circumstances, it's more common now than it used to be in the like cyber age, where a lot of their life is lived through screens. So if their reputation is harmed from a false statement through one of these networks, depending on if the elements,
Well, think about it. In South Carolina, I don't remember the elements completely, but you're going to have a communication of the allegation. Okay?
But yeah,
the false statement that is communicated to people.
Yeah.
It's got to be false. It's got to cause
people who aren't privileged to hear it, like publication.
Yeah. So think about publication.
And then there's special harm, which that's something. We'll talk about that some other time.
But no, that's where they fail a lot of times. Like you said, unless you are self-employed, it's going to cause economic damage. Proving the damages again is difficult.
Yeah, that's the hard
proving
part
the damage
for
to
sure.
reputation is difficult. But
and sometimes even proving something's demonstrably false, because it has to be false.
Yeah,
what is said about you
exactly.
But
it does happen.
Common example is someone starts going around telling people that you have HIV or something like that, and then a prospective employer catches wind, and you either don't get a job or you get fired. It's something like that. But they're not as hard as some other claims, but they can be tricky.
Yeah. But like you were saying, Facebook or social media has really changed it. Because if you think about, let's go back to just the history of America here. How do you communicate to the public? Okay. Look, we can go all the way back to like a town crier. So unless you went and told the town crier to
pigeons,
pigeons,
I don't know,
carrier pigeons, tell the town crier that, Charlie is untrustworthy and will steal your money. Other than that, where people, I don't think, 50, 60 years ago, people were taking out ads in the newspaper just to call out their friend, but people may do that all day long on social media now. And that's what people do have to worry about, is because if you do make a false statement, that is communicating it to the public. Because even if you only have 200 friends or something, that's the public that are not privy to that information.
Right.
And so, that's a critical one. And like you said, self-employed people, business people, those are the ones that really have a decent claim, especially if the allegation has to do. And like online reviews tread a very fine line. Because, we see it in our practice, and, anything we do now, we look at online reviews.
Yeah,
yeah. How many times have you looked at a Yelp review for a restaurant and someone makes it sound like you are walking into a hellhole of a restaurant?
All the time.
And all of that may be false.
Yeah.
Or at the very least misconstrued.
Yeah.
And so,
if someone drags you on a Better Business Bureau, is, again, like, it has to be demonstrably false.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the way that people communicate now, just in general, it's entered into a weird new landscape, because these third party platforms aren't publishers. But anyways, that's a whole other can of worms. So I got a call. I got to jump on, Derek. This was fun.
Yeah, man. I'm glad we could just this was just on the spare of the moment here.
Yeah.
We're living our glory days of sitting around in torts law, like I said, going through a tort exam and everything. But I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you sitting down.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'll catch you the next time I'm up here.
Yeah, this was fun, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one, man.
All right, you too.
Thanks for watching.